Everyone, welcome to the CPT open meeting. We'll need to have CPT folks in front, please, because you'll have to have a microphone to have your voice heard over the webinar. So contributions from folks who worked on the guidelines today. So my name is Michelle Brooks. I am the manager of the Higher Education Program Office at ACS. And one of the areas that we cover is the ACS approval program. So that's probably how you know me. We also have the department chair discussions, and you may know me from that as well. There are folks online. This is a webinar, so if you have questions for the panel, please feel free to add those into the question box, and they'll be addressed. So we're going to be discussing new guidelines. And let me introduce today's panel. So we have Scott Reid. He is from Marquette University, and he is the chair of CPT, at least until what, December 31st? And then we'll have a new one. We also have, so I'll start now down at the end since we're getting name tags here. So Barb Reisner from James Madison University. So she's on the committee. Edgar Arriaga, who is from University of Minnesota Twin Cities. He is the outgoing chair right behind Scott. So he started the odyssey of the revision of the guidelines. And then next to Scott, we have Cora Macbeth from Emory University and Ashley Mahoney from University of Minnesota Twin Cities. So we're going to start this today with Scott giving an overview of kind of the new structure of what the guidelines are going to look like. And from there, we'll talk specifically about some changes and some flexibility. If you have questions in the audience, raise your hand. I will bring you the microphone and we will move from there. So just feel free to ask questions as needed. And I'll go ahead and let you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. So this is an open meeting. So of course you can ask anything that you want to, but one of the things that we wanted to focus on is just providing some information to you about the process of guidelines revision, which we've been undergoing. And you've probably seen this or had to employ it at certain points, which is the 2015 guidelines. So just a bit of a quick background on CPT. We're essentially charged with properly accrediting institutions. And so part of that is developing the guidelines for approval of bachelor degree programs in chemistry. And again, this was last updated in 2015. Right now, we have almost 700 approved chemistry programs. So that's really great. Part of the challenge in terms of guidelines development for us has been among these 700 programs, the very large diversity of those programs. And so we have programs that range from PUIs to R1 institutions with diverse missions. We have faculty sizes from 4 faculty to 60. We have student graduates from 2 per year to 250 per year. And so, that's a challenge, and so part of recognizing that has led us to think about the structure of the guidelines and the processes by which we approve programs. And also motivating that is the desire to be inclusive rather than exclusive in this process. We also have to consider that chemistry is a very dynamic discipline and is changing, and will continue to change and evolve. And so we need to be on the forefront of that, or we would like to be on the forefront of that, as opposed to being reactive. We would rather be proactive. So the goals of the current revision were a few. One is to really baseline what the critical program requirements are and to increase transparency around those. And so that led us to recast the old language of musts and shoulds into 3 new bins, which are critical requirements. Those are the requirements that every program must meet. So in the old language, those were the musts, essentially. Primarily they were. The shoulds were recast into a new category, which is normal expectations. So these are things that programs should be doing, but we recognize that not every program will be doing those, and so what we would like to see is a program's, working on normal expectations within a cycle of continuous improvement. The third category is markers of excellence, where we can really call out things that programs are doing really well, and highlight exceptional work that's going on in institutions. Along with that, there's been an expanded emphasis on skill development in both the classroom and the laboratory. That was initially emphasized in 2008, continued to evolve in 2015, and that's continued to evolve up to this point. Thanks to Edgar and his team, we've introduced a formal requirement around diversity, inclusion, equity, and respect. And so we have a standalone section in the new guidelines around DEIR issues. We've increased focus on safety. We now have a standalone safety section that was developed in concert with the Council on Chemical Safety. And so those are the major changes, that you're going to see with respect to that, but we can talk in more detail about any of those things. So I think with that, I will stop talking. I just throw it open for questions from you or anybody who's online. Hopefully there are some people online. So we'll see what you have.
And I have one more introduction. So our question and answer person today is Felicia Fulalo Cashwell. She'll be taking the questions from the folks that are online. And I apologize because the sound, it seems, is not loud enough in the webinar. So I'm going to try and talk a little louder to see if it makes a difference. But I was wondering if maybe the panel could answer a few questions about some of the bigger changes that we see in the guidelines that we talked about over the weekend. So these might be interesting to the group.
Sure. We're going to start with Barb.
Would you like me to talk about lab hours?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the changes in the guidelines now that we have these three categories is looking at the lab hours. Our normal expectation is remaining the same, that students, we would like them to do 400 hours of lab. They can still do up to, it's 180 hours of this through undergraduate research. But the critical expectation is 350 lab hours. We came to this number based on what we would like to see students do in the laboratory. And we looked at semester lengths, the typical length of a laboratory, and that's how we came to that number. So for a 15-week semester and a 3-hour lab, that works out to be 8 laboratories beyond general chemistry. Now, we further expanded this to have a little bit more breadth in the laboratory because we recognize that students might have interest in biochemistry, environmental science, material science, name your favorite field here. So we expect that 220 of these hours would be taught in the chemistry department. And if a department deems it appropriate to have these, say, in a biology department, as long as there's a focus on the molecular science and the department can explain to their students why this will help them towards whatever career path in this flavor of chemistry, that the remaining hours can either be outside of chemistry in a closely chemistry adjacent field, I think is our favorite word, or through undergraduate research.
Edgar, you want to add anything?
Well, I can mention can you hear me okay?
Like,
Okay, what about people online? They can hear me okay as well. Okay.
eat the mic. That's for the
Yeah, I will. So maybe what I should do is talk about a little bit about the DIR guidelines because
Please
that's
do.
a new component, and this is brand new. Nothing has been done like that in the guidelines before. However, in the past, we were asking questions about the diversity of faculty. Encourage everyone to try to up your effort to recruit faculty from diverse backgrounds. The DIR guidelines are in a way an extension of that, but with the vision that it's not only the faculty that matters, it's our students, it's our system as a university or program, it's also the policies that are in place, the strategies that are being in place. So all of that was captured in this new component of the guidelines that we call it the DIR guidelines. It's a comprehensive description of what would be all these different topics from students, from training, from faculty to departmental policies, etc. But the idea is not to have all of that thrown at the community at once, but really have that as a way in which we can create tools. For example, we are exploring the possibility of having what we call a DIR tool in which departments can make a self-assessment, and they don't have to basically report on all those categories that are there, but basically highlight things that they believe are important or things where there could be potentially room for improvement. That is recognizing that each single department will have a very unique journey in terms of DIR, and there will be other geographical or situational limitations in how this is implemented. So that's the new component that we are very excited about including in the new version of the guidelines.
Awesome, thanks. So I'll just talk a little bit about a work group that I was on that was looking at frequency of course offerings. And again, a lot of these are works in progress. They will be finalized. Our goal is to actually send sort of a draft of the guidelines out soon to the community for feedback, but the ultimate goal is to have these finalized by early in the new year. But one thing, so our current guidelines essentially distinguish foundational courses, which of course must encompass all 5 traditional areas of chemistry, from in-depth courses, with the idea that 4 of 5 foundation courses must be taught annually, and at least 4 in-depth courses exclusive of research must be taught. One of the things we've heard from programs is that that can be a burden, especially if they have courses that they would like to offer but have zero enrollment or low enrollment, and they're not allowed to offer those. So our committee made a recommendation that we reduce that requirement to offering 3 in-depth courses a year, which we think would be a positive change. And that's an ongoing discussion. But I just want to mention that because I do want to highlight that, you know, we do very much try to be responsive to the needs of the community. And so if we see that there are problems, we try to address those. Of course, the policies that we have were developed with good intentions, you know, but you know, sometimes they need to be modified.
That's great. I'll talk a little bit about one of the subcommittees I was on, and we were charged with asking the question, what about virtual labs or online labs moving forward and simulations? And so our group talked about this a lot. And of course, during COVID, as you know, CPT tried to be very responsive to the needs of institutions that were required to move all of their learning online. But moving forward in non-pandemic times, the committee is really asking that programs continue to offer in-person laboratory experiences for their students. At its core, chemistry is a discipline that requires practitioners to be able to manipulate compounds safely, manipulate equipment, take measurements, use instrumentation. And that is very hard to learn how to do and gain expertise online or virtual, you know, in a virtual simulation format. So simulations and online experiences can be used to supplement those in-person labs, but we really want to encourage programs to make sure that your students are still getting those in-person experiences and experiences manipulating chemicals, compounds, and equipment. So that's still core. We have said, you know, if during the introductory chemistry course sequence, if some of that needs to be done in a remote sort of format, that's okay in the introductory labs, but not for the foundation or in-depth courses. Those all should remain in person as much as possible.
Couple other adjustments we made. One, we recognize that library holdings and the need for that is changing. So we've reduced the expectation of 14, a subscription for 14 journals down to 9. So hopefully that'll also help as many schools are targeting library budgets. And another change was to the math requirement. So we still want to see Calculus 1. But the second course, we're trying to allow a little more diversity in that to incorporate stats or data analysis or other options. So a little bit of flexibility there, as we've already talked about, in terms of offering other courses.
And the last piece that I'll add is the contact hour changes. So in January of 2020, we pulled together a blue ribbon panel of folks from a variety of different thanks, one of them is here. We pulled together a blue ribbon panel of folks from a variety of different institutions to talk about contact hours and the challenges that are met, especially across the diversity. And so the guideline is actually a little more complicated than I'm able to give you right now, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest condensed version. We no longer differentiate between A and B faculty. So all faculty are faculty, whether they teach lectures and labs. 1 hour is 1 hour. So lab, 1 hour on the clock counts as 60 minutes. So a lab is worth 3 hours if it lasts 3 hours, even if it's a 1 credit lab. We want to see faculty with less than 15 contact hours, 15 or fewer contact hours a semester. However, we realize that sometimes that's not possible. So if a faculty member has more than 15, but they average to 15, then they're cool. And everybody can use the averaging. As long as there's one caveat there, we don't want to see more than 18. So more than 18, the Blue Ribbon panel felt was concerning. So there's going to be a big space in there. What if somebody averages to 16 or 17? So they're not really meeting the guideline, right? So, and they're definitely not at the 18 maximum. So there's a lot of different, what we would call variations. What do we call those? Situational variances. So there's some situational variances that take into account things like faculty members who have, perhaps they only have teaching and service requirements and they don't have research requirements. Maybe their teaching load can be a little heavier. Faculty members who are teaching the same course, like 4 sections of Gen Chem Lab. They only have 1 prep. Faculty members who have TAs or somebody else to help with the burden of teaching, the burden of teaching. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? But people who have assistants or some other way, faculty members who can spread out some of the work. So there's a bunch of these, and I don't want to be specific. Some of them are common sense things, like if you have to cover for an emergency leave of any type, of course, the contact hours can be higher that semester for that one-time issue. But we feel like this encompasses more faculty members, gives people more flexibility, and it also is consistent with some of the union contracts that we're seeing at some institutions. So it allows those schools that have union contracts to still meet their contract needs, stay within the 18 or fewer hours overall. And you can look at the specifics. We're going to release a draft version, and you can see all the specifics there.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the math
Oh, yeah, people won't be able to hear you.
People in the webinar can't hear you unless you're on a microphone.
So I was talking about the math requirement. So Calc 1 seems to be the highest, or what's, because in our program we have Calc 3 because we need for PChem and triple integral, and then spherical symmetry, all these aspects. So what's the requirement or recommendation about math?
So I think as Cora mentioned, I mean, sort of the strict requirement is still at least 1 semester of calculus, but I think one of the things that we like to do, and for your program, that's great. I mean, if you require Calc 1 through 3, because my program is doing that too, for your certified track, that's great. But one of the things we want to do is to provide some flexibility for programs to develop different tracks that might be in different areas and might have a different math requirement. So there could be a track that say doesn't require the level of PChem that your track does, where a student might benefit from taking a statistics class or some other type of class. And so we're just trying to provide flexibility.
So just a follow-up question. So if in a program we have a different tracks, we can actually have a differential requirement.
Yes,
That's correct.
100%. Okay. And the one thing I think a lot of people don't understand or maybe appreciate is that we require you have at least 1 certifiable track, but some programs have only 1. At our institution, we started some new tracks, which could be certified, but were meant to be more flexible and generally won't be certified. But we have programs with 5 or 6 certified tracks. So, I mean, it's up to you how you define that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the people in the room? Online, anything? No?
There was a question about when would the draft of the guidelines be released for community feedback.
So we're hoping to take all of the chicken scratchings of all of the work that the committee did this weekend, collate those and have them out to department chairs on October 1st. We ask that department chairs disseminate them amongst their faculty. We're hoping to have a listening session at CERMAX, one at the Midwest meeting, regional meeting, and possibly one at the Southwest meeting. So you'll look to us for more information on those listening sessions, where if you're going to one of those regional meetings, you can give feedback on the guidelines there, or you can get the electronic copy and provide feedback through forms. What the committee will do then is take all that feedback, collate it. When we come back and meet in January, we'll put all that together for another final version.
We have another question from online. Are there any changes anticipated to the polymer requirements? So MSN, any changes there?
Want to take that?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. Right now, there are not significant changes in the MSN requirements from the previous guidelines. They can, programs can still take a distributed approach. I will just say, as a member of the committee, we've seen some, I think, some pretty innovative approaches to meeting that requirement and some interesting courses that programs are putting together. But that requirement will be the same. You can do it in a single course or distribute it.
I have a specific question regarding capstone requirement. So as far as I remember, going through the document, ACS doesn't, I think, impose any standalone capstone, right? Rather, the capstone experience are kind of distributed in the course in terms of undergraduate research or more open-ended type of situation. Can you elaborate a little bit about the capstone requirement? Is that a necessary that we develop a standalone capstone, or what is your?
Not at all. I think once again, that's something that's left to the individual programs, in the sense of, if you feel like a capstone course is good for your program, and what we see, and I'll invite my other panelists to comment on this from their experience, but what we see a lot of times with programs about capstone courses is that's where a lot of the or maybe a significant amount of the skill development takes place. And so we see them frame it within that way, but there's no requirement they have one from that point of view. So I think we're somewhat silent on whether or not you should have a capstone kind of requirement. We certainly don't require one. Anybody else want to comment on that?
No, I would just go back to the notion of undergraduate research, right? I would say that, we have a good number of programs that, in order for graduates to get the ACS approved degree, they need to conduct undergraduate research, right? They can't get the lab hours, or they can't get there if they don't do it. But we don't require undergraduate research. We have a lot of institutions also that can certify undergraduates without undergraduate research and just do it through the number of elective laboratory courses they ask. So we're not trying to mandate that. But, one of the things we ask about as part of the report is we ask you, how are you assessing your majors, your skill development? How are you thinking about that? And we have seen, over the years, more and more programs moving to a capstone model, but we're not saying you have to do that. It's whatever works best for your program and your faculty.
Thank you.
This is a quiet bunch. I would tell my Gen Chem class, don't make me call on you.
Maybe, oh, great.
There we go.
That
usually works.
I wonder if you could comment on the continuing emphasis on 5 subdisciplinary areas, given that many or most of the people being hired right now don't necessarily identify as one or all or any of those, and how that influenced your discussions or did not influence your discussions in this revision.
That's a great point. It's not something that at the foundational level, this requirement of the ABIOP, which is the traditional areas of chemistry, and Corey could actually speak very well to this because Emory has a very unique program. But it's important, I think, to understand that even though that is there at the foundational level, that the coverage of those areas still remains. That can be done in many different ways, and we see programs do that with sort of a traditional suite of courses. We also see them doing it in a distributed model. We see programs that teach, for example, analytical chemistry in a distributed way, distributed over several courses. So it's important to remember that even though that emphasis is not changing in this revision on the foundational level, that can still be done in a flexible way for programs that might need that, that maybe are hiring faculty where you don't want to teach a course that's a quantitative analysis or something. I mean, you want to teach courses in different ways. I think that can easily be done.
And the other place to have flexibility is the foundation does dictate the ABIOP, or at least coverage of those subjects in a way that gets your students some foundational knowledge. However, the in-depth courses can be anything you want. So you can really focus your in-depth courses on interdisciplinary classes, interdisciplinary studies. There's nothing in the guidelines, past or present, that says you have to have 2 semesters of PChem. Just give me a moment. You just need the foundational PChem course, and then you don't have to, you could have 4 in-depth synthesis courses, because all of your students are really interested in synthesis, and that's where they go when they leave. So the flexibility, I think, is in the in-depth piece of the coursework. But again, like Scott said, we do see folks who are teaching bioanalytical chemistry, biophysical chemistry, and they're covering the biological piece of it and the physical piece of it in the first courses after introductory chemistry.
Mhm.
Yeah, the other thing I'll just say that we've seen more and more of are sort of these really interdisciplinary integrated lab upper level in-depth courses where, you know, the students are just using a lot of different tools and a lot of different approaches. Maybe it's biological assays along with instrumentation to answer sort of complex problems. And so people are being really creative in those in-depth courses. So we certainly don't want to be prescriptive. And I don't want anyone to leave this room thinking, you know, the only way to meet the requirements is 2 semesters of Orgo, you know, 2 semesters of PChem. No, we want to encourage departments to be creative and you know, again, do what makes sense for their program.
We do have a question from online. In terms of undergraduate research, can students work on a year-long project as a group, similar to a capstone project, rather than an individually supervised by both a faculty research advisor and within a class, providing various skills, including research and communication?
So that's an interesting one. So perhaps the question might be, how do we treat sort of like course embedded undergraduate research experiences?
Right.
That's a good one, because I don't think right now we have a specific policy on that.
No, I don't see anything that's specific to that. But I think that the committee would have to review kind of what the course looks like to evaluate how the hours could be used.
Yeah, I think, and you know, we've seen a few examples in the last couple of years where people have sort of developed in-depth courses that are sort of you know, course embedded research, in-depth courses where the students are sort of working in small teams on different research projects with the faculty member leading it. And, you know, they have to use X, Y, and Z pieces of equipment. They have to, you know, write a report. They have to document their outcomes. So we have seen things like that. So sort of a capstone or a cure embedded in an in-depth course.
And it would certainly hit the right check boxes, right? Because you're developing skills. So you're working in the skills area, which is in the guidelines. Your students are getting teamwork, you know, they're working on teamwork. And this could be, even depending on how it's organized, an in-depth course if it's focused on advanced topics and the students are developing the work in a way that really reflects research. So it could count the hours could count through an in-depth course lab. It could also check the boxes for a lot of skill development. It would have to look at it a little bit more. And by the way, for folks here and online, you're always welcome to call the office and run these ideas by us. If we don't know the answer, we can easily contact these folks here and then get the answer for you. But if you're having questions about this and whether it fits, please reach out.
We won't discuss what happens if we don't know the answer.
I will just add for the people here, I think one thing that the committee feels pretty strongly about is that, you know, whether you're doing a cure, like a course embedded research experience, or whether you have students participating in undergraduate research and writing reports, you know, as a program or as a department, it's really helpful to have a rubric for assessing those projects, not only for your faculty to know what you're looking for, but also for the students to know, what are my learning outcomes? What am I supposed to be demonstrating? So, we really do encourage programs that are using undergraduate research to think about the assessment of those projects and what you're looking for. What skills do you want to see the students demonstrate in those written reports?
Mhm.
And this question hasn't been asked yet, and that is probably people are wondering, once the guidelines have been approved across the board, when are they going to be implemented? So many of the guidelines that have been proposed are more flexible than the ones that were in the past. So for those ones, we would see instant implementation because they're not stricter than what we've had in the past. And therefore they give programs more flexibility. For others, we may have to wait a little longer in order to redo our forms to be able to collect some of the data that are necessary to do the assessment. So for things like contact hours, we actually have been using those pretty much since the Blue Ribbon Panel when we evaluate your contact hour list. So nobody's asked that, but I think probably people are curious about that.
Mhm. And I think I would just say, like, it may not always appear that way, but, one of the things that we've talked about a lot in our meetings and we want to be very intentional about is encouraging and not stifling innovation. So we want to encourage programs to do things innovatively and learn from what they're doing, and popularize that to the best degree that we can. So if you have some ideas about, doing something that's different, I think that that's great. And I think we would work with you in the office with.
So any more questions from the room or from the webinar?
Questions or comments?
comment,
Anything?
yes.
Yeah, like anything folks want to share about the approval process or the periodic reports.
And remember, annual reports are due August 31st.
We're here to listen.
And yes, you can have an extension. I'll just tell you now, you have extension until September 30th.
So we do have a comment and a question from the webinar. I applaud the CPT on its assertive position regarding DEIR issues. Can you offer a few examples of how this topic can be inserted into the undergraduate curriculum? So examples of how to insert DEIR into the curriculum.
Yeah, so is it on?
It's on.
Yeah, so yes, this is very generic right now. It's holistic, but there's going to be something clearly written down for this. One of the ways to do that in the undergraduate curriculum is, for example, to have a collection of role models of different identities in which basically we can celebrate that we all can contribute to the specific field. There are some efforts out there that have been collecting that in the analytical field, for example, and there are some great resources that are available through the ACS and also through other private institutions as well that will be collected. So that's one of the things that is going to be highlighted in the guidelines. Another example, is what we call the D&I moments or diversity and inclusion moments. And this is a short snippet of something related to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion that one can present at the beginning of a class, or you can do it at the beginning of a faculty meeting or a group meeting or any other activity in which you have a bunch of people like here. In fact, today we could have been started this with a D&I moment, but we didn't think about it, so too late for that. But those are two examples, very specific examples of how we can introduce DEIR to the classroom.
And we're hoping long-term that in addition to providing guidelines and then providing some guidance on best practices and markers of excellence, that we can also provide resources. So we say, for example, we want to see a rubric for research reports. Well, what if we gave you a template for a rubric for a research report? Then you don't have to start something from scratch. You can use it. We wouldn't require that you have to use it. You have to use our rubric or you won't be approved. We won't have that. But we'll give you resources or provide resources that give people starting points for a lot of the things that we ask for. And one of them would be working with ACS has a DEIR office, working with them. We have an inclusivity guide that is accessible on the ACS website that helps you if you're creating documents, if you're writing papers, if you're putting together a survey. It gives you the guidance that you need to write that in an inclusive manner. So
Mhm.
we have some of those things already available, but putting them in one certain place and connecting them with the guidelines will make it easier for folks to kind of see examples of how those guidelines might be able to be met. But that is later in 23. So just put that out there.
Yeah, the other question was, there was a question, was there a comment as well? Oh, on DIR?
The comment was just to thank CPT for taking action on DEIR.
Okay, thanks.
And some of you may not know the work that our committee does, but actually we've been sort of here, this is our third day, of work, and sort of this is the end of our work, but we started our meeting on Friday with a DEI moment, and I'll call Greg out because he's not here. But he gave that moment, and it was a really powerful one. And so that's something we do for our own meetings, and we start that. And as Edgar said, that might be an easy way to bring that into a faculty meeting, or, could be powerful.
I also want to highlight this DEIR tool that Edgar alluded to earlier in the discussion. So this is a short 10 to 15 minute survey that can be deployed to your department, all aspects of your department, faculty, staff, students, undergrads, grad students, postdocs. And what it does is it shows your department and where it is with respect to the guidelines for DEIR. It's not an analytical tool. It's just a snapshot of where your program is at a certain point in time. We will collect the data anonymously. We collect some demographic data, but we don't release it unless we can release it in aggregate and not put anybody, identify anybody. And we have codes for your school. So if this is a tool that you think you're interested in, we have a few little disclaimer things to write on the top of it, but we will have it available probably by September 30th or so. We'll have it ready to go. But it is something where we want to look at the schools in aggregate and look at how they're meeting the guidelines. Is it required? No. Are you going to be judged on how well you meet the guidelines based on what you've done in the survey? No. It's simply a self-reflective tool for your department to use to look at where your department is right at this moment with respect to the guidelines, where you're doing a great job, where you might need a little bit of help. So I just wanted to pump that up a little bit.
So there is a question, and I believe that this is a question for ACS. Would you consider decreasing the cost per person or going to a standard institutional fee for small, medium, and large cohorts for the online ACS safety course to make it more accessible to all different size institutions?
We'll take that back to our colleagues in the Committee for Chemical Safety and in the Safety Office at ACS. But thank you for bringing that up.
If it was up to me, yes.
Other questions, comments about the process, the reports, challenges?
Don't be shy.
Anybody in the webinar have any comments? Anything you want to share about anything associated with the ACS approval process? No.
Yes. Oh, we have to give you a microphone.
Yes.
I apologize.
So I'm gonna, I do happen to be a member of CPT, but I'm gonna speak as someone who just filled out their periodic review. So I just want to make sure to say that really clearly. I am speaking as an audience member. We collect a lot of information, and some of it has nothing to do with our accreditation criteria. And so I just want to make a plea for us to take a look at the information that we collect and decide whether there's places that we could decrease that would not impact the information, the quality of the information for accreditation, but might save time for departments. We spent a lot of time tracking down graduates, and where graduates go isn't related to accreditation.
Yeah, that's a
Thank
great,
you. Yeah, and I can address that. I certainly appreciate that comment. There is a lot of information that we collect over the years. So there's a couple different pieces of information. There's information that the committee collects because it's part of the approval process. And then there's information that we collect as ACS because part of our mission in the education division is to know and understand what the landscape of education looks like right now for undergraduates. And part of that is learning things like how many graduates do you have? What do the demographics look like of your faculty, of your students? Where are your students going? And those types of things are more or less something that we collect. And we do plan on doing a real thorough review of what we absolutely need in order to report back to the community. So all of those data are available, linked to our website. So you can look at annual report data from the last 20 years. You can look at aggregate data. You can look at aggregate data on faculty demographics for all different titles of faculty. You can look at faculty salary data. That's probably everyone's favorite. And you can also look at data from a graduate program survey. So all of that is now going to be publicly available. You can also request from us a certain slice of that data, of those data, for your own purposes. What we can do is just give you aggregate data in some, perhaps you want to look at a geographic region or a school that's similar to yours, or a program that only offers bachelor's degrees in chemistry. So all of that is available. Go to our website and it's linked there. So yes, it is, some of it is not associated with that. And what we have to do is figure out what we absolutely need and data that's clean enough that we can report it out with confidence.
yeah, I think I would add a couple pieces to that, within the new guidelines with the critical requirements, I mean, one of the things that we're looking at with those is, are we collecting the data that we need to be able to assess those? Can we collect the data? And if we can't, I mean, that's going to modify, how we do those. The only other thing that I would say is because I was department chair for 7 years and it will never be again. But, a lot of that data that we put in the ACS report is things that I had to use, elsewhere. And so, I mean, in strategic plans and various other things. And so, I mean, I realize that there is a burden to some extent, but, I think it is important that programs track their graduates and know where they're going. I mean, I think that that's an important thing, but, I'm sorry.
Wait, we have an online question first and then we'll get to you.
Will the new guidelines further promote green and sustainable chemistry in the curriculum, not just by a particular track, but for all chemistry students?
Barb, do you want to talk? Yeah, I can mention that because we do have language both about green chemistry and sustainability in the new requirements at the critical requirement, normal expectation, and marker of excellence level. So there are elements of that incorporated into the new guidelines.
I'm behind you.
A number of years ago, CPT used to publish all of the colleges and universities, the number of graduates. That stopped 15 years ago or so, maybe. That data was useful in terms of talking with our administration. I guess I was wondering if there's a chance it might come back.
So we were really, by publishing disaggregated data, we were violating every FERPA law on earth. So we stopped doing that. However, we still have aggregate data, and you can ask for a slice of information from us about schools that are similar to yours, and we can show you the numbers. So you can compare your school to other programs that are similar to yours, but we just can't give you disaggregated data. Yeah, because not every school publishes all of their graduation data. So if it was publicly available, we could, but since it's not, we had to pull that. We can turn it around really quickly. So we have everything ready, just pull from the database. So please just contact us.
And I guess one thing I would add to that was, which I was impressed by, is we have a new reporting system. Obviously you've gone through that, you've experienced that, but that gives the office the capability to really do a lot of data analytics. And so Michelle at our BCCE symposium presented sort of a snapshot of that, not from the entire 700 school cohort, but from maybe 250 of those schools. And very impressive, I mean, the amount of data that's coming out from that. So in terms of looking at trends and things like this, I think it'll be very powerful.
Yeah, and the trends that we're seeing so we obviously don't have every bachelor's degree program approved. We have about 85%. But the trends that we're seeing within the cohort of approved schools are consistent with the trends that NSF is seeing overall with bachelor's degrees in chemistry. So we're confident the trends we're seeing are reflective of what's happening in the area. So that talk, my talk, and also Scott's talk about the guidelines and the changes are available on our website on the first page. So if you're interested in looking at more of the presentation that I gave at BCC or that Scott gave at BCC about those, feel free to log in. I probably should have something that you can click on to get to the website, but not quite that forward thinking today.
So question to you guys, in terms of a periodic review, we are going to have the periodic soon in 2023. So I looked at the previous review and also the letter that we have received. And there was, it was continuing, the accreditation, but there was, I think there was a comment or 2 comments were made. So what was the expectation is that we need to address somewhere when we are going to submit the report, those questions, or it is going to be taken care in terms of our report as a whole, which will by itself will answer the question. How should go about that?
Yeah, I think that's something that in your new report, you would want to respond, and you'll be given the opportunity to respond to any previous comments that have come through. Again, because in sort of the new way that we're going to do things with the critical requirements, one thing that often happened in the past is that, we would tell the program, like, you should be doing these things. And then like 7 years later, if they weren't, we would tell them, oh, okay, you must be doing these things now, which is, I never really understood that well, but that's no longer going to be present there. But if there were things, for example, that were noted as suggestions, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what they said in terms of what it was something. Hey, you might want to think about this or whatnot. That could be something that you would respond to, in the next review.
Yeah, typically the things that that the committee expects to be responded to are things that say, in your next report, you must. And then there's another section that says, these are suggestions for further improvement. So the things that they say, and most of them are taken care of because it has been 6 years. So if it's, you've got somewhat high of contact hours and the next one you must show, you're probably going to cover that anyway. But if there's something that's not covered, especially if it has to do with infrastructure safety or something along those lines, we would expect either uploading a response, or there's a catch-all question at the very end of the report that you can include stuff like that in.
So rather than asking for more comments, I'm going to rephrase the question. Are there any things that you've heard that you're excited about or that you're not excited about from what we've said today? Or worried about?
Okay, look under your chair. You should see something that says free periodic report. Just kidding. Pass. Free approval. Yeah. You get approval. You get approval. You get approval. Sorry, it's really quiet in here.
Well, we really appreciate everyone coming out. And I don't know if everyone here is from an approved program or if there are people here potentially from programs seeking approval. The one thing that I want to say, and I just want to stress, you probably heard Dr. Michelle Brooks of the office several times say, just reach out. We're here to help you. I really want to reiterate that CPT's position is one of service to our community, and we're not trying to be gatekeepers. We want to help everyone get to where they want to be. And so the office is incredibly responsive to to all of you out there in departments and programs, because you are the people they serve. And, we're not just here for approved programs. We're here for programs seeking approval, or even programs just trying to get closer to where they want to be. So I did want to say that we're not trying to be exclusionary. We really want to serve the community.
And some of the things that we addressed today, that the committee addressed today in the guidelines, were things we heard from the community. So we heard about the 400 hours being tough. We heard about 4 classes being offered every academic year being a hard thing to attain for some schools. And so we tried to listen, and we will do that again as we get responses back to the guidelines that we send out in October.
And if you're in the process of putting together an application for approval and you're like, I have no idea what they're asking for here, if you shoot it, if you shoot the office an email, they are great and have tons of examples, and they really work to lower barriers.
Felicia, are we getting anything else online?
We have I am excited about increased flexibility being provided and the increased focus on DIR and sustainability in chemistry. Thank you.
Too bad they're not here in person.
And in the vein of appreciation, I really like how you're, again, doing this flexibility thing, but also finding a balance to make sure that institutions still have some teeth when they go to the administration and saying that they need some things, because I think some institutions use this as a way to kind of convince their administration to kind of continue to fund them in a respectable way. So thank you for finding that balance.
Yeah, no, thanks. And the committee certainly, thank you for that comment. And that is something that the committee certainly recognizes as important. And it's something we often hear from programs. They're like, no, put it in the letter, because if you put it in the letter, I can take that to my dean or my provost, and like that letter carries weight. And we want to continue to be that lever for your programs to help you get the resources that you need.
And following up on that, because all of the responses and the outcomes and the reviews are in the chemistry program approval and review system, or CPARS, if you actually need a letter for your dean, write to us. We will transcribe it into a letter and explain more. So if you would like a physical letter, we're trying to keep everything in the system, because then everything's in one place for you. And the next chair doesn't have to say, where's that thing you did 6 years ago? It's all right there for them. But we do offer still writing those letters.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And it sort of alludes back to what I said earlier about, a lot of the guidelines had good intentions, which is the intentions that were good were to provide programs with leverage. And I know in my program that's worked very well in a number of cases. And so to me, that's the balancing act that we're trying to hit here, is that, we want to give programs leverage, but we also don't want to make it so onerous that then they can't meet that requirement. And so that's a bit of a delicate balancing act, and I think it's what we're trying to achieve.
Certainly, thank you for your input, for all of your suggestions, for coming to these types of open meetings, for coming to department chair open discussions online, to coming to luncheons. If we didn't have that connection with the community, we wouldn't know all of the things that are needed, because although we have a fine representation of folks on CPT from a lot of different kinds of institutions, hearing from the community at large is really the thing that helps us help you.
Mm-hmm. I think we'll hang around for bits. I mean, if there's something that you didn't want to ask, but maybe you want to dialogue about, please feel free to come to one of us, and we'll be happy to discuss it.
And we'll post the recording for this session on the website, which, don't take me at this, but I believe is acs.org/approval program. I think that's the shortcut for it. If not, you know how to get in touch with me, and I could tell you.
Thanks for being here.
And thanks to the committee for the work that they've done this weekend, which has been really amazing. Thanks, everyone.